So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Ketti Salemme, who is a Senior Communications Manager at TINYpulse. Hi, Ketti. How are you doing?
Hey, Adrian. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me today.
You are very welcome. Now, Ketti, just for the benefit of our listeners and readers, can you tell us a little bit more about you and a bit more about the work that you do? Just give us a bit of background.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm TINYpulse's Senior Communications Manager. I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area and headed up to Seattle, where TINYpulse is based, and started working here about 3 years ago as employee number 4.
Wow.
I guess to give a little bit of background too on TINYpulse. So we're an employee engagement / HR tech organization. We help over 1,000 companies around the world improve their work culture, their employee engagement, and ultimately just transparency within their organization.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So specifically at TINYpulse, I run our PR and communications team. So not only do I help create new reports and white papers that we push out on a fairly regular basis, but then we also promote those reports out, and they also run our webinar program in which we share our expertise on employee engagement, work hacks, trends we're seeing in HR, and just things like that.
Excellent. Now, I know that we were chatting before in the setup of this interview, and you were telling me some really interesting stats and hacks and bits of advice around sort of employee engagement that I'd like to that's why I wanted to get your view on it and sort of get you on the podcast, because I wanted you to share some insights into that. But one of the first things that I wanted to ask you about was because you were doing a lot of employee engagement surveys in the first instance, but one of the things that you're doing is actually you make all of your surveys sort of anonymous. And that's not necessarily very usual in this sort of space, I understand. So first of all, can you tell me, why do you make them anonymous, and how does that sort of affect sort of response rates and engagement with the survey, that is?
Yeah, that is a great question. So in our experience, anonymous surveys really help protect employees so they can truly speak their thoughts without needing to play politics, or really just to save face. And, it can be hard sometimes to be completely candid with somebody if that person has the ability to fire you or make your life, harder. I would say, even if you consider yourself to be an approachable manager with an open door policy, it can be intimidating for employees to actually take their leader up on it. So kind of our thoughts around making the platform anonymous is that it really helps establish trust amongst the team, while also showing that you as a leader respect employees' privacy and that you really value their input, even on sensitive or maybe unpopular topics.
Okay. And so what's the sort of differential you get on the response rates between somebody where it wouldn't necessarily be purely anonymous, but it would be associated with somebody's sort of name perhaps, or it even might be tracked, or people given an ID number or whatever, and your purely anonymous approach? What's the differential?
Yeah, so I mean, from our end, definitely, we've seen a lot of our clients actually see response rates consistently as high as 75 to 90%. And that just really shows, I think, that employees value being able to voice their thoughts in a safe platform. Also, I think leaders acting on that feedback plays a huge part in that. And rightfully so. I mean, if you're getting this feedback from employees, it can often be invaluable and really candid. So, when leaders take the time to go through that feedback and then act on it, or at least, speak with their employees and say that we heard this feedback and we really value it, they definitely can see response rates literally as high as 75 to 90%.
Right. I mean, in your experience, because I know you work with some sort of big clients, and probably, and also some big clients that would have, I guess, what some people might talk about is enviable sort of work cultures in terms of how innovative and collaborative and so on and so forth that they are, and also, are built on great cultures. But you're saying even when you have a great culture organization, like that actually there's still a value in having anonymous surveys, because actually even within that environment, however open and honest it's supposed to be, sometimes there are some things that people still don't feel particularly 100% about saying in terms of a named response.
Oh, absolutely. And we've heard time and time again from our clients that, an employee might respond back to a question and say either like an idea, like a business idea, or just make some remarks that might ultimately help, whether it be the office, the work culture, or the success of the business. And a lot of the time, you'll have a new employee or somebody who's a little bit more junior, and they wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable otherwise going and knocking on the CEO's door to bring up this idea or to voice like a concern or an issue that might be bubbling up in your company.
Right.
And so by having this be like anonymous, it can be a huge way for leaders to really, exactly what you're saying, get this feedback and act on it before any issues might become too severe that it's, turned into something catastrophic or something like that. So it really does give leaders a good pulse on if their work culture is continuing to be happy and a fun place, or if there's maybe a problem, or if there are just general ways that employees could see things going better.
Okay. And does that mean that your whole platform is anonymous, or the feedback that you collect on the whole platform, is it anonymous?
Well, yeah, so another good question. The majority of TINYpulse platform is anonymous, including, as we went over, the weekly pulse survey responses, as well as a section called suggestions,
right,
where folks can submit ideas at any point. The only area that gives the option to show your name is called Cheers for Peers, and that's actually TINYpulse's most popular feature. And here you can just send kudos or cheers to your coworkers for a job well done, whether it be big or small. And so, when you're giving a Cheers for Peers, you can reveal your name if you'd like, although there's definitely still the option to remain anonymous.
Right.
And yeah, the reason why we wanted to leave this section in particular optionally anonymous is because recognition can just be so personal and meaningful that it can be really great to walk over later and thank that coworker who sent you a cheers, or, send one over to personally thank somebody for help that they did with you. And so we wanted to give people the opportunity to personally recognize others.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that makes sense, because actually as you say, in the name of it, it's called Cheers for Peers, but it's like actually a named somebody kind of get, saying thanks very much, that's brilliant, and putting their name to it is probably way more powerful than something done anonymously.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, and you know exactly who sent it, and it's always great to get a pat on the back and to know, especially if you get one from a coworker maybe in a different department, that that people are noticing your hard work and they are paying attention to you. And I feel like that is really rewarding, and it also reinvests the employee after they're receiving that recognition. It really reinvests them into the work culture and into their work ultimately.
Sure. I like that, and I wish actually generally we would do more of that in not just in our work lives, but just generally in our day-to-day life, both work and personal.
Completely.
That would be kind of great. But also the other thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna add to that. There's so many times in just my everyday life too where I wish that I could send people cheers for peers.
Yeah. Well, I think isn't that what sort of text messaging or WhatsApp or all these kind of different things are for? Or maybe actually it's just a case of you pick up the phone and call somebody and go, you know what, that was great, thank you, I love you, blah 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 blah, whatever it might be. Yeah. It's like
so true, completely.
We need to sort of sometimes remember what it is to be human sometimes.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So the other thing we were talking about, you guys and your team are really into these kind of things that you call kind of creative work hacks that and this is it's all about improving culture and productivity and so on and so forth. And that was something that really I'm really interested in, sort of uncovering and finding all these little kind of cool things that kind of people kind of do and some of the results that they get. So it'd be great if you could share some examples of really kind of cool kind of creative work hacks that you've kind of come across your in TINYpulse or across your client base that are driving a better culture or better higher employee satisfaction, because that'd just be really useful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And we have a number of different recommendations. I'll share a couple to start with, and then if you wanted to dive in, sure, I'm more than happy. But, first, I would say it's always great when you can have some sort of employee event or game or just appreciation planned. So we've done things within our own office, as simple as chair races around the office. And that's like a fun way to sort of break up the day, get people, maybe into a different mind state, like waking them back up again. Yeah. So doing things like this, or going down to the park as a team for lunch, or taking your team out bowling or to happy hour, this is huge for boosting employee morale and relationships, and just rewarding employees after working hard. And it doesn't need to necessarily be something really huge, like a massive company party on a frequent basis. It can just be something as simple as chair races. Uh-huh. We've seen in our research that only 24% of employees feel connected to their peers, which is actually 11% lower than last year. So when you're doing these employee bonding activities, it can really help employees feel more connected to their work and to the organization overall.
So, Casey, you mentioned sort of the 24% that only feel connected to their colleagues, and that's 11% lower than sort of last year. Yeah. That's a huge, huge drop. I mean, is that sort of in line with just general engagement figures, or is there something else going on here?
Yeah, we actually found in our latest report, the 2017 Employee Engagement Report, we found that there was a drop actually in transparency, as well as communication, that both employees and managers are rating their own work culture, just transparency and communication, a little bit lower. So this is definitely something I would say to be wary of, to be cautious of within your own organization. That is so important, especially, with the unemployment rate. At least here in the States, the unemployment rate right now is very low, which ultimately means that employees are much more likely to be able to find jobs elsewhere. And, in order to retain employees, I think it's very important to invest into your people in order to keep your top talent on. So being aware of these numbers and the fact that employees are rating themselves on a global scale as less connected to their peers and, maybe less transparent within their organization, if you can take that and implement that back into your own way of running your work culture as a leader, that would be incredibly valuable, I think, to the ultimate success of your people and your organization.
So let me be kind of clear. Let me kind of just ask another question on that. So are you saying that as the employment or the labor market sort of develops, and then you get to a lower level of unemployment, you're saying effectively that actually people's expectations about what they want from organizations in terms of how they communicate, how transparent they are, how involved they get people in their overall, the development of the company and things, it just goes up?
Yeah, exactly. So I would say, if you are feeling connected to your team and you really bond with your peers, that can do a great job of making you feel more invested ultimately in the success of the organization and looking forward to going into work and working hard so you can continue working there. And if people don't feel like they can talk to their peers, or, it's not a transparent culture and they feel like they can't go to management for whatever reason, and a job comes by, they might be willing to take it. And if this is one of your top employees or somebody, essential to your team, like that can be huge. Okay. For the success of that department as well as the organization. And so in order to, I guess what it comes down to, in order to retain that top talent and just, improve your Glassdoor scores, things like that, it can be really useful to try to invest back into your peer and employee connectivity.
Right. I mean, and then there's, I guess the thing I was going to ask is that the idea around that communications therefore is, I mean, it has to be a reflective and responsive sort of thing then, I guess. It has to be, communications always has to be listening to the needs of of the employees, of the staff and the team and things, and thinking about kind of what they need rather than it just being sort of broadcast, and thinking about what people need to be told and thinking about kind of almost kind of what they need and how those needs are changing. So that makes makes the job really quite difficult.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with that. And I think So here at TinyPulse, we have a culture committee. So based on our TinyPulse results internally, we'll meet about once every week or once every other week, and we'll go over this data. We'll sort of see how people are reporting their feeling and any qualitative feedback they might have given, that sort of thing. And then also within the TinyPulse platform, it allows you to trend and track how your employees are rating themselves. So look at that, and then we hold a company-wide meeting where we'll really deep dive into this.
Okay.
So we will discuss it as a whole organization, and I feel like that really does a great job of making sure that our own internal communication is kept strong and very transparent. It's not just the leaders are the only people seeing this feedback, but we want to make it a very collaborative environment where people do feel like they can have an open discussion about various issues.
Okay. And how often are you, I feel like, pulsing your team? I mean, what do you sort of recommend for your clients? I mean, because it feels like, some people do engagement surveys and some people do them once a year, some do them twice a year, sometimes people do kind of quarterly, some people are much more frequent than that. I mean, where do you think is the sweet spot?
It varies depending on our clients. So we work with organizations that are as small as 5 team members and as large as 150,000.
Right.
So I would say, for a smaller organization, it might be more beneficial if you're pulsing on a weekly basis versus, maybe if you're a larger organization, you're sending out a pulse once a month. And the whole point of TinyPulse and the tiny part of it is because we really do try to keep our survey questions small and easy and simple to answer. So you'll only ever get one question a week, and a lot of the time that'll be on a 1 to 10 scale or something quick and easy that you can respond back to, provide your insights without it maybe being as big as that annual survey that a lot of organizations do.
Right. So, I mean,
and ultimately, I was going to say too, ultimately, I feel like that not only helps with response rates because it is so manageable from the employee side, but it also really makes it simpler for the leader to be able to tackle that issue. If they get some sort of feedback and it's only one response out of a handful that week, they'll be able to tackle it versus getting a whole, plethora of information one time a year and having to go sort through that, see if maybe it was even too late to tackle that issue in the first place. So right. It's beneficial for a variety of reasons, definitely.
And so, I mean, I guess, but with all of these things, whether it's you're asking your customers for feedback or you're asking your employees for feedback, surely the everything, success is completely underpinned by what you do with the data. Because there's no point asking somebody's opinion on something and they're not doing anything about it. So, I mean, does your work, is it just more about the data collection, or does it also kind of start to highlight some of the kind of the standout concerns and then allows people to track what they're doing about them?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's I completely agree. It's essential for leaders after they've gotten that feedback to actually act on it, or at the very least to meet with their employees or send something out that says, we heard your feedback. We so appreciate you taking the time to do this, and we will act on it as soon as possible. And the reason for this is because, if it is just sort of going into the abyss, as an employee, that can be really demotivating. Like if you're sharing your feedback and it's not being heard or listened to, why continue responding? And so we always give that feedback to leaders of our client companies and say, once you are getting this feedback, it's really important to acknowledge it and act on things, even if you're only acting on the small things to start with. But at least you have it, and at least your employees are aware that you're looking at it and you're taking it into consideration.
Okay. And so I tell you what, what would be useful, Ketti, is that if I said to you that, so you guys have huge amounts of experience in the employee engagement space because you're helping a whole number of people kind of understand what they're doing, and how they're doing it, how to respond to some of the issues. I mean, from your experience, if I was to say to you, what advice would you say to an entrepreneur or a leader who says, I really think I need to tackle the the employee satisfaction and employee engagement issue that I believe I may have in my firm, what would your top bits of advice be for that person?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'd say, great job looking more into investing in employee engagement. I mean, your people are your most important asset, so measuring their happiness and productivity is essential to ultimately the well-being of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage them to start looking into an anonymous survey platform. Again, this really gives employees the ability to voice their honest thoughts, and then also provides leaders with that invaluable feedback that we were just talking about. And additionally, I would say building recognition into your culture is essential. What I mean by this too is that when your team members feel like they're regularly recognized, like we were talking about, and appreciated just for the work that they do, they're exponentially more likely to stay with the organization as well as be engaged in the work that they're doing. And, it does feel great when you realize that others are taking notice of your hard work.
Yes.
Ultimately, it does come down to increasing communication and transparency.
Yeah, I think it's one of those fascinating things. I mean, it's almost a bit like, it's always continually fascinating to me how we take feedback from customers and we'll use, and sometimes encourage customers to freely name people that have stood out from them, because we think that's that's a great thing, a really helpful thing, a really motivating sort of thing, and yet we forget to do that inside our companies.
Completely. Yeah, and I mean, going along the same lines, like, it is exponentially, like, if your employees are happier, they're going to be better at serving your clients. They're going to be more invested in the company as a whole. They're going to be more invested in client success. So it's very noticeable. It definitely does trickle to other parts of the organization.
I wonder if it's kind of easier to get employees to recognize their own kind of teammates. I wonder if it's easier to do that to get customers to actually recognize named individuals. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know Cheers for Peers, definitely. I think it's the most popular feature within TINYpulse because of how sticky it is.
Right.
Once you receive a Cheers and you notice how great that feels, like, you're more likely to send that out. And we actually did just change Cheers for Peers, so you can now send them to an external individual. So a client of yours, you can send that out, or somebody who doesn't use TINYpulse at all yet. And so that's really great, because internally we've been sending a lot of cheers to clients of ours, to people interested or people we just spoke with who were reading our research or something like that. So that's very fun, because it is sort of similar to what we were talking about before, in that sometimes you do have that day-to-day life and where you want to send a thank you to somebody, and so if you can do that in a quick way, that goes miles. And I think stickiness of it does do a good job of raising that internal recognition that often you will give to clients but maybe forget internally.
Yeah. And are these cheers, do you have an option to make them public or private?
Yeah, so we right now sync with Slack, and then also a number of our clients have their Cheers for Peers on display throughout the day in their office. So prospects who are going in to interview with the organization can see that recognition. They're also tweetable and shareable, I should say. So you can, post it on social media. We've seen a number of people after they leave the organization too, using that on their resume and saying, these were some of the bits of feedback that I heard from my team members as well as my manager. So that's really great, because it does do a great job of sort of vouching for who you are and the work that you put in.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's applicable in a number of different ways.
Excellent. And before I ask you my last two questions that I normally ask on the end of the podcast, so I wanted to ask you if there's anything that you think that we've missed that you'd like to highlight before I ask you these last two questions.
Yeah, one thing that I definitely wanted to share out, because we've seen this consistently in our research, is just the importance of growth opportunities to employees. So I would definitely say it ties in with the work hacks we were talking about before.
Right.
Especially for millennials, we're seeing more and more that having those growth opportunities is so important for their ultimate retention at the organization as well as investment. So if possible, maybe providing some sort of like learning opportunity for your team, whether it be a fund to send employees to a new conference, or even just holding brown bag lunches where folks from different departments can, share a little bit more about what they do. So our data analysts or someone in sales, things like that. And when people, I guess, have the continuous ability to sharpen their skills, it's huge.
Right.
So I definitely recommend that.
All right, fantastic. So that brings me to the last kind of couple of questions, and they are, the first one is a little bit selfish, Ketti, I must admit. And it's my own piece of...
I love it all.
It's
Look
my
at
own.
your book.
It's my own piece of surveying, as it were. It's not tiny and it's not a pulse, but it is. So as you know, I wrote a book called How to Wow last year, and what I've been doing over the course of the last year is asking different people's opinions on what is wow service or experience for them, and so I'd be really interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I was just saying to you, I was taking a look at your book, and that sounds like a fantastic read, and so I'm excited to order that into our office and take a look soon. But
Cool.
I would say, wow service and experience to me is really when somebody truly listens to you and takes your feedback seriously. So whether, they're then able to do something with that feedback and act on it, or even, as we were talking about earlier, just saying, I hear you, I appreciate your thoughts, and I'll act on this as soon as I have the opportunity to. This is so valuable. And, oftentimes it seems like other priorities can get in the way, but just taking a step back to really listen to what your people are saying or what your customers are saying, that's so appreciated and so important.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. That's really interesting and incredibly valuable as well, because I think giving somebody your time and attention is such a huge gift.
Oh, definitely. And I feel like that's almost getting to be less and less common nowadays with the fast-pacedness of, with technology and everything. So I think if people are able to commit to that, just listening, it definitely goes such a long way. Fantastic.
So Ketti, that brings me to my last question that I always ask at the end of these podcasts. And this question is this. You can't laugh in advance. The question is this. Is there anything that you would like to shamelessly plug?
Well, I do love that question. I would have to say, if you're looking to increase your internal communication, spot problems before they get out of control, and just create a stronger work culture, definitely check out TINYpulse. Easy to get in touch with our employee engagement experts, and they're more than happy to listen to your own unique story and help out in the best way we possibly can. So all you have to do really is just head to tinypulse.com, and somebody will connect back with you.
Ketti, thank you very much. That's been fascinating, interesting. I love some of the stuff that you're doing, and also you're kind of working with some huge brands, but also a huge variety of smaller kind of companies. So it's also a big issue, and with all the hullabaloo around sort of technology and how it's going to change the workplace, it's important for us not to forget the human beings that exist that work in the workplace, and to help them to become the best that they can be, I guess. So
yeah, I agree.
And so I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your story, some of the insights, some of the research, and some ideas around kind of your approach and what makes it different. And yeah, thanks again for your time today. That's been great.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for having me. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch too.